Okay, so here's 10 reasons why you should get Kill Team Shadowvaults and 6 reasons why you shouldn't. Now, we're going to start with the reasons why you shouldn't because we'll spend a little bit less time on it, really. I've been thinking a lot about this in the last few days since the pricing and the fact that it was coming out very soon. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I kind of weighed up my reasons as to why I would or wouldn't get it. So I suppose that's really what I should be calling this video, is 10 reasons why I should get it and 6 reasons why I shouldn't. So it's a very much a personal thing. Now, when we're talking about this, my reasons aren't going to include it's so expensive, blah, 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 Games Workshop are bad, we hate them, they're the devil. It's not going to include any of that. It's just my own personal perspective of why I should or shouldn't get it. And then we'll have a little bit of a sum up at the end. Okay, so first and foremost, it's far too soon since the release of Kill Team Into the Darkness. So that came out just 6 weeks before the release date for this box, which obviously isn't a lot of time at all. So if we look through the history of the Kill Team kind of bigger box releases, we go right back to Pariah Nexus. Now that was the last big box release of the previous edition. So since that came out, there was 19 weeks between that and Octarius, 10 weeks between Octarius and Chalnath, another 19 weeks between Chalnath and Nachmund, and then 11 weeks between Nachmund and Morok. And then we had a 14-week gap between Morok and the new season Into the Dark. And then inexplicably, there's a 6-week gap between that and Shadowvaults. Now, I don't know why they would do this. Perhaps they have some stock shortages, so they're expecting smaller demand, which means there'll be a smaller backlash if they run out very quickly. I was watching an interview with Peachy, who has left GW now. I was watching that the other day, and he was talking about the White Dwarf magazine. Now, that is a very important publication for Games Workshop. You know, it is a constant stream of revenue every single month. And he was saying that they need to secure the data and all of the articles and all that sort of stuff, anything from 6 months to a year in advance. So perhaps next August, September, they might already have all of their White Dwarf content ready to go. And they want a Kill Team new season to launch at that time, in which case they're trying to condense all of the other content into basically between now and then. So maybe a release now, something in January, February, and then something about June, so as they can actually launch in August. Something I'm not sure really, to be honest with you. But yeah, it certainly seems a bizarre option to release it so quickly. Next up, it's the same terrain as Kill Team Into the Dark, which again, most of you won't even have painted yet. So that short release and the fact that terrain-wise, there's not much difference between what we got in the last one. I think that's a pretty big detractor for anyone who's looking forward to getting this box. Now, there's lots of arguments saying, but if you get both of them, you won't have to buy boarding actions later on. And now that's making a big assumption that you play 40k or that you indeed want extra terrain for it. So that's the second argument. It is the same terrain. Number 3, and it is boarding actions related again. If you are collecting these sets in order to build up your boarding actions collection, you're unlikely to be able to use it when boarding actions come out, because I'm almost certain that there will be some sort of rule book or scenario book that will come out with boarding actions. So if you want to be able to use those rules and all of that information, you'll need that book. So you might have to buy boarding actions anyway, or wait until that book is released at a later date. Number 4, if you look at the kill teams that are in this box, if you don't like them, or maybe even just like one of them, then there's not much point in getting this box. Now, they will be available later on as their own kill teams, but if you're buying it just to keep on top of the releases and just to keep on top of these kill teams, have a really good look. If you're not that interested in them, then don't bother getting this box. Certainly the Carscreen kill team, lots and lots of buzz about that. It looks very, very good, and less so about the higher attack. So if you don't like the look of these, don't bother getting this box, because again, if you already have Into the Dark, you've got the terrain anyway. Next one is the terrain in general, and this is, I suppose, for anyone who hasn't played Kill Team Into the Dark so far or wasn't interested in that box, is thinking about getting this one. I set up and tore down one scenario, and it was a pain. This terrain looks absolutely terrific, but it is an absolute pain to put together and to take apart. Now, I've got another video coming up in the next day or two on what I do to overcome that problem, but it certainly is very, very fiddly indeed. So when I was setting up, it was the second scenario in the Into the Dark book. That setup took far too long because I was constantly going back and forth trying to find the correct piece of terrain, make sure it was oriented the right way, and yeah, it took much longer than it should have done. In fact, between building it and tearing it down in the end, it probably took just about as much time as it did to play the game. And finally, for the negativity, if you have already got Kill Team Into the Dark, how much realistically are you going to get from this box? So there's an extra small sprue which has some extra kind of light terrain which links up to the Kill Team Into the Dark, so kind of Galadark setting, and then there's some robots. So in terms of all the terrain and that kind of thing, this sprue that you can see here, and obviously the book itself, is the main differences. So if you're expecting a hugely different experience from what you've already got, apologies, if you own Into the Dark, I don't think you'll get a huge difference. Okay, so that's me done for the reasons why you shouldn't get it. Obviously, there will be other reasons. You either can't afford it, or you're one of the people that holds a grudge against GW and the release schedule and all that different stuff. So there's the fundamental reasons why I personally wouldn't get it. Now we're going to move on to the more positive side, which is 10 reasons why I would get it and why, honestly, I am going to get it. Now, this 10 reasons is actually 9 reasons because there is a shameful plug right in the middle of it all. First of all is the price. Now, before you jump on my back and tear my eyes out, just hear me out for a little while first. Now, this box is going to be £110. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this is cheap. I'm not saying that at all. I know that we pay premium prices to be in this hobby. So let's get that out of the way at the start. But this is the cheapest Kill Team big box release in almost a year. And it is the second cheapest one overall. So only Chalnath at £105 has been cheaper than this set. Now that £110, why might that be? Maybe it's because there was another big release just 6 weeks ago. Who knows? But certainly price point wise, I was expecting this to be around about the 125 mark because that's the price that Morok was. That was the last of the big box expansions before Into the Dark. So yeah, £110. It's not cheap, and I'm not saying it's cheap, but it is less than I expected it to be. And like I say, cheapest Kill Team release in about a year. Number 2 is the Kill Teams themselves. So as much as I enjoy playing Kill Teams from the annual and from the compendium, the ones that we get in the boxes are just more varied and specialist. So from the looks of these Kill Teams, that's not going to change. You know, we can see lots and lots of different specialisms and that kind of thing in there. I'm not in awe of the Necrons at all, but the new Cadians look absolutely brilliant. So third is the scatter terrain itself. Like I said, that was a negative last time because there's not much of it, but we do have kind of these bombs, and you know, we've got a big box with a gun on it and a huge great big table with a big cutter on it. We're going to be able to use them, I'm assuming. So I'm hoping this is going to bring a slightly more narrative influence into our games, and I'm all about the narrative. So the actual robots themselves, if we get some general operational use out of them, I think it will be great. Okay, time for that shameful plug. If you decide to buy this game, you will get the opportunity to use my Element Games affiliate link, which is down in the description. So if you use that link, I get a tiny little kickback, which helps me to make more and more videos like this. And there's also a little code down there that if you use that in checkout, it will double your reward points for Element Games. So a little bit for me, a little bit for you. Next up, believe it or not, it is one of the negatives put into a positive. It is because we've got the same terrain again. Now, when I was setting up for my game that I played last week, it was hellish trying to get the correct panels and that kind of thing to go in the right places. And that's because the setup I used almost every single piece of the terrain that was in the box. And so finding the right pieces to go in the right places, and the fact that certain pieces had to be made up of two smaller ones in order to get it to reflect what it said was available in the book, it's going to get much easier because we're going to get duplicates of those specific tiles now. So it doesn't sound like a massive positive, but in actual use on the tabletop, it is going to make it much faster to set up our games. Okay, so sticking on that narrative, once again, it is the same terrain. Who thought there would be two positives out of this? Now, the terrain obviously is identical. If it was different, it would just make everything so much more confusing. This game is complicated enough without throwing in a bunch of very, very similarly sized tiles with very similar look and feel to them. I'm glad, if anything, that this is staying the same, just because it won't make things more confusing. Now, the fact is that all of this terrain, and I'm assuming anyone out there who's already got Into the Dark and will be buying this, I'm assuming you'll be keeping all of this terrain in one box. So if it was all slightly different or had changed in some way, it would just make those setup times even more difficult. Right, let's move on to the next one. And again, it is another flip reverse. So you will have all the terrain you need for boarding actions. So as much as it might be a pain to either find the book and all that kind of stuff at a later date, and to be fair, even if there is a rule book in this box, you will have all of the terrain that you need for boarding actions. So you need to sum up what is going to be best for the whole lot. Now, I'm assuming that there will be a book, and I'm assuming that it will be available on its own at a later date. None of that's confirmed, but I'm just kind of, for my process of whether or not I'm going to collect the box, the Shadowvaults box, I played that into my thinking on that one. Okay, so next up, it's a buy now versus buy later scenario. So in terms of the cost of this box, £110. If we look at kind of the breakdown and how much it's going to be to buy things later on, and I'm talking mainly if you want to avoid buying the terrain. So if you're thinking about picking up the kill teams, the book, and just the extra scatter terrain and robot at a later date, I think that price-wise, you might as well just buy this box because it's going to cost about the same. So if we imagine that the kill teams are going to be about £35 each, so that's 70 quid. Then we've got the book that will be £27.50. And then we finally have the kind of the scatter terrain, the robot, and that kind of thing. That I believe is going to be sold separately later on. So I don't think that there will be a kill team terrain box for this, like they do with the other ones. They kind of separated out the kill team from the bigger boxes and sold them. Separated out the terrain from the bigger boxes and sold them separately. I don't think that's going to happen here. I think that they will move ahead and they will sell the boarding actions box, and then all of the scatter terrain from these 4 sets, or perhaps even individually, will be sold aside from that. And I reckon that if you buy this individual sprue, that's going to cost maybe 20 quid. So if you put the prices of all those together, it will be more than this box, and you won't get the terrain. So if it's a kind of reward yourself later by buying them separately, you won't actually be doing that. It will be much cheaper to buy them up front in this box. So by getting this set, or maybe getting the book later on, you will be able to continue the already great campaign that started in Into the Dark. So if you continue to get all 4 of these boxes as they come out, I think it's going to be a really huge offering. Side note, I'm hoping that there's some content available down the line later on, so as we can combine all the terrain that we're getting, so we can start filling out these maps even further and making our maps even more crazy in these great big labyrinths. Now, I am hopeful that the future releases for this season will be slightly more varied. I hope it's not all this kind of labyrinth style terrain, but I'm hoping that in later editions we're going to be able to get content that will use some of this and some different elements of terrain, so you can start mixing up our gameplay slightly differently. But certainly the Into the Dark campaign has been very, very well received, and indeed what I've played of it has been very good, and we'll be able to continue that great gameplay in Shadowvaults. Okay, so this last one is really for anyone who doesn't have Kill Team Into the Dark, and that is that I'm assuming you're going to be able to get all of the Gallo Dark rules or the terrain rules in the new box. So the reason I say that is that the Kill Team Into the Dark book hasn't been released on its own yet, so I'm assuming that all of the rules are going to be duplicated in Shadowvaults. So if for whatever reason you didn't get or didn't want Into the Dark, you're going to be able to get all of the rules here. Okay, so that's it. Now, no surprise, in the run up to this video, as I was preparing for it and that kind of thing, I've basically talked myself into getting this set, and I'm now very, very much looking forward to it. There are obviously very big detractors for this. The close proximity to the last big box and the similar terrain obviously lead the charge on reasons to not get it, but you know, I'm very happy at this stage to kind of stay in the pocket and continue with Kill Team on this season. And in fact, I feel like if I jumped out of it now and didn't bother with this release, I might never jump back on. So certainly I'm going to stay with it. If you've got any strong reasons or feelings as to why you wouldn't or would get this box, I want to know about it in the comments as well. And I think that this sort of content is going to become a regular feature on the channel as well. I do the weekly price breakdowns of all the new releases and that kind of thing, and I think I'll follow it up a few days later with content like this, you know, pros and cons as to whether or not buy that week's releases. But thanks very much for watching this, guys. Much appreciated. If you want very similar content to this going forward, don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Have a great day, and I will see you very soon. Bye.